Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm. Today we're going to be discussing time is not on your side. Our presenter today is Karen Masullo, and she'll be with us momentarily. We'd also like to have you become our friend on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions, Twitter, Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We'd like to remind you that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this information should be discussed in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. Please do not consider this information as legal advice or legal opinion. We're pleased to have the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools as a long-term sponsor, probably for the last 4 or 5 years now. Dr. Martin and Jill Royka are out working with clients today, so they're not able to join us, but we did participate in a conference up in Tennessee just recently along with them, which was a wonderful thing. We'd also invite you to go to firestorm.com. You can watch past webinars. You can register for future webinars in this monthly series. Our presenter today, as I mentioned, is Karen Masullo. Karen is the Chief Intelligence Officer at Firestorm. She's an Executive Vice President, and she's been working with social media for a number of years, and she recalls some of the beginning phases before it became so incredibly complex and difficult to cover.
She's old. What you're saying is she's old, right?
She's old, but she's wise. Karen, over to you, please.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. And everyone, this is Bill Baker. Bill is our moderator for our sessions at Firestorm. If you have any questions during the session, Bill can assist you if you use the chat function of GoToWebinar. It's in that little console, probably somewhere on the right side of your screen. If you open that up, there's a little chat box in there, and you can directly talk to the famous or infamous Bill Baker. And Bill, thanks as always. Bill is also recording this session for us today. It will be uploaded to the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools YouTube playlist on our YouTube channel, and you can find that on our website at firestorm.com. And under resources, we have briefs, papers, just a whole bunch of really great stuff for you. So thanks so much for joining us today for this session, especially because I know you are probably in spring break. And for those of you that have joined us with your teams, sitting around a conference table, maybe you're having a cup of coffee and some sticky buns, thank you. I realize this is time to expand your education in this area, and we sincerely appreciate it. Because we appreciate it, because we appreciate our relationship with the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools, we do have a few things that you can take advantage of. And I'll quickly just let you know that, as always, we are going to waive the fee for an assessment, and that is a self-guided a co-guided, we'll take that with you, assessment. It takes about an hour. It's an hour conversation, and from that we'll build a comprehensive report for you of where we gauge via our proprietary software. We enter all your information and come up with a value and a report for you of where your vulnerabilities might be. And you know, in the first of the year, we conducted a webinar that was sort of a look back at 2016, and we tried to predict what we see coming at you for independent schools in 2017. And then the next month we talked about benchmarking and how you can gauge where you are in your preparedness programs and continuity of your schools. And so today what we're leading into is then what do we do when something happens, how do we message it, and next month, we will be talking about how do we monitor what that messaging is, and how do we monitor things so that we can predict an incident rather than always be in a reactive phase. And that leads me to two other things you can take advantage of. We have a program that we're going to be rolling out called Crisis Stop. And for those of you who were at the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools meeting, you received some information on it and on our behavioral risk threat assessment license that we're going to be offering to you at no fee for the first year because you are a member of the Tennessee Association. And so if you'd like more information on either of those programs, what they mean to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can contact the beautiful and brilliant Bill Baker or myself at webinars@firestorm.com, and I meant Bill was beautiful, not me. Webinars@firestorm.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can use our contact page at our website on firestorm.com, and we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have in that regard. Why? Well, because we know that in any situation in a crisis, when minutes matter, seconds count. And so what we're trying to do for you today is talk about how we can go about creating a time machine for you that allows you to buy time. We're going to have a time ATM. And by being prepared, you're going to be able to go to that ATM and buy yourself some time. Why? Because we know that during a crisis in the first hours, almost everything you learn is wrong. We have a school system that we work with that had a spout of bad weather over the past couple of days. And they were debating whether to close one of their elementary schools because the elementary school had lost power because some trees had come down and taken out some power lines. And they were thinking they could conduct school, they still had backup power, the kids might have cold lunches, and they were debating what to do. And the communications people, because they're communications people, wanted to put out a message. And so they put out a message internally prior to an external message that said, a tree came down on a power line at 5 a.m. this morning, and so we are currently reviewing whether we will continue with school operations at blank elementary school this morning. And as is the nature of all messages that we will create from this moment going forward, they will be shared by someone on Facebook or on Twitter or elsewhere, as was this message, this internally meant message. Now, there's nothing terrible in it, right? It's not a big deal, so we're making decisions. There'll be a little confusion whether the school's open or closed. That was probably premature. No message should go out until a final decision is made. However, that was not the controversy. The controversy was because it was shared and then picked up by someone who was a high profile in the community, in a council position. And that person said, what I don't understand is how you think the tree came down at 5 a.m. in the morning. We lost power at 1 a.m. Was this a different tree? Why was the tree in the message? It didn't matter. It created a point of contention and confusion in a message where it just didn't matter, and they had not verified the information. Additionally, it opened up a second avenue of controversy, which was, did law enforcement contact the student communications liaison, or did the student communications liaison contact law enforcement? So there was a whole other group that was off discussing that and what was the right protocol and on and on and on, when all we were trying to do was decide whether this school was going to be open or closed that day. Eventually they closed the school for that day, which should have been the message. Due to inclement weather and a loss of power and in concern for the greatest safety of our students, we will not have classes today. It's an inconvenience to the parent, but we want to make sure that the students are safe, right? But why all that other information? That's what we're going to talk about today. During a crisis, you can allow your first response to become a complete secondary crisis simply because you're not prepared, you're putting too much information into your messaging, and there is an escalating flow of events. Everything you learn in that first moment is wrong. You have to ask really good questions. Someone needed to say, what time did the tree actually come down on the power lines? What specific power lines? How many other people are without power? Is it just residences? Are there businesses? Were the school bus operations affected? How did you get this information? Did somebody tweet this information to you? Or was this validated through a phone call with an official who is allowed to speak on these subject, on this matter? And that escalating flow of events creates confusion for us because as new facts are known, the issue can then bubble up again. What if it's something more significant? What if there's an incident of violence or of inappropriate activity between an adult and a student? And as new facts come out, rumors and other conversation bubbles back up again, right? And who leads that charge? Well, the media outlets have that job. That's their job, is to go find out new details. These new details just coming in, and that raises the profile of a crisis you might have thought you'd settled down. And you become under intense scrutiny for your handling of any matter. Everyone during a crisis wants to tell you how better to handle the crisis. And I'm going to tell you now that you don't have time for armchair quarterbacks in a crisis. There are going to be informal coaches in your life, and those informal coaches can be your board, other teachers, your head of school, your mother, who might call you and say, you know, I really think you need to get out in front of this thing. When it is not an appropriate time to speak, because you're under intense scrutiny and you already have this loss of command and control. How you respond can create a second brand crisis for your organization. When people think of your school, we want them to think of safety of students and great education, the great colleges they eventually go on to. We don't want them to think about, oh yeah, that's that school that really messed up handling that crisis that time, remember? Let's not have that be you. Let's do it by remembering that every crisis is a human crisis and there are a whole bunch of humans involved. We have teachers, we have leadership, we have our students, we have other people who work within our organization. We have vendors on our property at any given time. We have volunteers on our property at any given time. We have parents on and off our property who have a significant voice in how we handle a crisis. We have a board or alumni that are very important to the survival. And we have prospective students. Those students who are going to join our organization for years to come. We want to make sure that we preserve our brand and let them know that we value that every crisis is a human crisis and we're not going to let that happen to the best of our ability. And remember who's held responsible in a crisis. You know, I show you these. They're not school related, but I want to walk through a couple of these with you because I think they're good examples of surprises. You know, Jim Satterfield, the CEO of Firestorm, some of you may have met him at the conference, always says the last time I had a surprise, or the last time I enjoyed a surprise, I was 5 years old and it was my birthday. And he's right. He doesn't like surprises at all. He likes to be, he's an engineer by training. So we can look at this information from the Oscars, and while it seems a bit humorous, there's a real story to be told here. The first thing I think about when I see this, I don't know if you thought about it too, but how complicated is this job at the Oscars? Get really dressed up, go to the Academy Awards, you can have a couple of envelopes, make sure you give the right one to the people. That's the job. Make sure you give the right envelope. So when we sit down and look at all of the different scenarios of what could go wrong, one of them might be you lose the envelope. So do we have a contingency plan if we lose the envelope? The other thing that might go wrong is we give them the wrong envelope. What's the contingency plan for if we give them the wrong envelope? Because what happens if we give them the wrong envelope is our brand is going to be seen by 42 million people or more as really making a big mistake. And you know what? The brand of PricewaterhouseCoopers wasn't so much damaged, but the reputation of the two accountants who were at the Academy Awards was. And they're actually no longer allowed to attend the Academy Awards because of that mistake. I got to think there was some better contingency plan and messaging around it after it happened. This next one I'm showing you because I want to make a very specific point. I do not in any way mean to be of how many times in your organizations, all of you sitting out there right now, those of you around conference tables, by the way, you all look fabulous. As you're sitting there looking at each other, how many of you have heard someone say, nobody in our school would ever do that? Well, that's too stupid. Nobody'd really do that. How many times have you heard that? Because it happens. It happens because of human error. Mistakes occur. And this one is a tough mistake. I've been doing social media for companies for a very long time. I've been doing communications for companies for a very long time. Web development. I'm a marketing technologist. It's what I do. I like data, I like information, and I like to see it shared. But one of the things I don't do is I don't use the same device for my personal as my business accounts. I just don't do it because it would be too easy to mix up one for the other. Not that there's any information that might come out that would in any way compromise any of the businesses that we work with. It's just not professional. And why bother with a mistake? This poor person and this organization never anticipated that their 61-year-old trusted employee would accidentally upload an adult-themed personal video to their business Instagram account. They didn't anticipate that nobody would know about it for more than 12 hours before it was taken down. Not only was the organization impacted by this, but this poor employee suffered shame and humiliation. This could have been avoided, and it must be anticipated. We also see senior leadership in many organizations is where we know the buck stops. So even though these are business examples, it can happen in your school, it can happen in your community, and you need to be aware of how it's going to impact your organization, its funding, and its ability to survive. There's a story that came out right after the State of the Union address. And this was bothersome to me, but I think it's a really clear indication of what we see going on in the world today. And I think we all saw it on social media, if you use social media in any way at all during the election cycle. People that were just the kindest, sweetest people in the world really took sides and became angry with each other. And in this specific instance, Dan Grillo posted a message on Twitter following the State of the Union address where the Attendees at the State of the Union stood for 2 minutes and gave a standing ovation to the wife of a fallen soldier who we were honoring. And he said, "Sorry, Owen's wife, you're not helping yourself or your husband's memory by standing there and clapping like an idiot. Trump just used you." I don't care what side of the political fence you're on. That's an inappropriate statement to make. And that person justifiably lost their position because they work for a political organization. They should know better. Although stirring up controversy through this political cycle, through this campaign cycle, became the norm. The company was inundated. Their phone lines crashed. People gave them death threats because of this insensitive tweet. So when you think your people aren't going to do something, they will. And they won't mean it. They'll do it in the spur of the moment. They'll do it in an act of passion. But you must be prepared for the contingency that somebody might do something that's just not very wise to do. And remember who's going to be held responsible. It could be your organization, your school that suffers a breach. You may not think it's a big deal until all of the financial information is released from your organization. What if someone hacks into your school machines and uses them as slave machines for, I don't know, laundering Bitcoin somewhere? Who knows what could be done? There are only two kinds of organizations, those that know they've been hacked and those that don't. So don't ever assume that there's not something nefarious going on within your organization. Do everything you can to make sure it's not going on, and be prepared with communication when you identify that it is, because heads will roll. If you get an opportunity, I don't normally do this, but I normally would like to recommend our books or those from our partners, but I'm going to recommend this by author John Ronson. It's called So You've Been Publicly Shamed. There was a period in our social media lives and communication lives where when social media was just bubbling up, we, as Bill says, way back when I was in the day, we would watch people sort of stab themselves in their own backs by misusing social media. And it was sort of a phenomenon. And after a while, we started seeing more and more instances of it happening, and it almost got comical. And I remember I used a graphic once that showed people sort of running after a fail, because we love to watch a fail on social media, which is sad. You know, we sort of, it's like when we watch someone rise to stardom and then fail. We almost, if we're thinking in a negative way, we might actually applaud that failure. So we saw that happening in this sort of mass kind of way on social media. And then watching someone fail wasn't enough. What we decided was we need to scarlet letter these people, and so we began shaming after the failure. And this book is called So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and it's a very important book. I would share it with students because it certainly talks about how one inadvertent message on Twitter for a couple people have completely destroyed their lives over the past 5 years and impacted their companies, their schools, and other organizations related. So if you get an opportunity, you might want to check this out. I'm including this slide because I want you to know that according to Forbes, leaders going into 2017, whether you're a school leader or a business leader or just a leader of your family, basically it looks to me like we can't trust anything. Don't trust big data, don't trust branding, don't trust the experts, don't trust the stars, don't trust minimizers, don't trust maximizers, don't trust the wisdom of the crowd, and don't trust your ability to control any message ever at any time. It's good advice. So we're not going to trust our ability to control our messages, but we're going to have some pre-created messages ready to go just in case, so that we can have a semblance of control of the truth rather than allowing the crowd to create what they want to by crowdsourcing our truth. I want you to think of this as we talk about the next messages. The difference between the almost right word and the right word is really a large matter. It's the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning. The nuance of language is important. When you think back to my school with the lightning and the tree and the power out, why did they mention the tree? It wasn't important. The elegance of a finely crafted, that was interesting, crafted piece of communication is simple and concise. Samuel Clemens also once said he apologized to a friend for the long, poorly written letter, but he said he didn't have time to write a good short one. And that's what we're doing here today. We are taking the time to write good short letters because confusion costs you time. Chaos and confusion, indecision, in the middle of a crisis, if you've never been in a crisis, and God bless you if you've never been in a crisis, don't want you to ever be in a crisis. But if you've ever been in a crisis, no matter how well prepared, practiced, and trained you are, it's frightening. It's scary. I've had 3 separate times in my life where during a downsizing for an organization, I've been threatened. And it didn't get easier the second time. It wasn't any easier the third time. I knew a little bit better how I was going to react, but it was still a very frightening experience. So your plans and your message maps help become your time machine. And by time machine, I think what I mean is an ATM. We're not going to go back in time. We're going to buy time. And we're going to buy time when you need it most. Because remember, when seconds matter, the police or other officials or people are going to come to your aid arrive in minutes. So there's a period of time there where you're going to have to make a whole lot of decisions on your own. And it's a lot easier if at least the communication part of those decisions has already been laid out, because it is easier to edit than it is to create. And if you identify your risks ahead of time, if you've got your plans developed, if you've trained your people, if you've attended our virtual exercises and exercised your plans, it's going to buy you time when everyone needs it the most and allow you to communicate in a more effective way to demonstrate your leadership and your ability to handle a crisis, because preparedness is a brand attribute. If I am deciding where to send my children to school, and I have the choice to send them to a school that consistently fails when it handles crises in communication, and one that demonstrates clear leadership, I'm going to feel a lot better about sending my child to a school to be safe and well educated, and one that demonstrates clear leadership. When we talk about how we are going to manage our communications, we walk through 4 M's: the message, where it goes, to whom, and today, more than ever, we have the opportunity to manage where and to whom our message goes instantly. Do you have the tools available to you to allow you to distribute a message instantly to all of your audiences, whether you're using internal school notification software or external social media tools, or preferably both? However, if you need to go and send a message out simultaneously on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and however, or many of the other messaging platforms, and the person who manages your social media is on spring break skiing in the Alps, how are you going to do that? So you need to make sure you have backups and backups to your backups. At Firestorm, we'll call it the rule of 3s. Not only do I have access to our social media accounts, I have trained 2 people who work with me to have access to those social media accounts, and our CEO has access to those social media accounts. So should something happen to me, should something happen to one of my employees, our CEO is always in control of the messaging. Senior leadership must be involved. Additionally, we need to set our people up for success in this regard. We've had a situation in the past with an organization where a threat was identified. It was a 17-year-old student who was making a threat. It was a relatively large organization, and the school, it had to do with a football game, and that was where the threat was going to occur. And the people who surfaced the threat, rightly so, were the marketing folks. They did a lot of international marketing as well to South American countries, and they had a pretty good marketing machine in this private school. And so the marketing people said, you know, we've surfaced this threat. We really think you guys need to pay attention to it. And they did, and they called us in, and we started moving forward in the crisis management of that. However, the message that the leadership gave to the marketing team was, good job. If you see anything else, let us know. What they did not tell the marketing team until we came in was, do not engage, because marketers are trained to engage. And so that's what they did. They engaged in conversation through private messaging on Twitter with the person issuing the threat, and inadvertently enraged and escalated the threat. It wasn't their fault. They didn't say anything wrong. It was just a very act of engaging was the wrong thing to do, but they had not been trained not to do that. They needed to bring professionals in while the leadership was contacting local law enforcement, who is the only one in that situation who has any business engaging. These poor young people were put in a position where they just weren't trained. Fortunately, it didn't cost anyone their lives, or the situation was diffused. But can you imagine being in the situation to be set up where lives matter? Of course you can. You wouldn't be on this call if you weren't. So let's make sure we've set up our people. And if our marketing people are the only resources we have, and when I say marketing people, I mean maybe you have one person, and that person's already doing 3 jobs, well, you've got to cross-train them in this as well. They can't just be messaging out. They have to understand how when they see a threat or identify a threat, they escalate that through the proper workflow. And we can help you do that, because then you need to monitor what's going on with that message, that messaging, and then have metrics so that you can understand how far it's gone, what was the impact, and who are the people reading the message, either coming in or out, because the only way you can create appropriate message mapping is if you understand who your audience and your stakeholders are. And there may be some out there you hadn't even thought of before. Another mistake that we see schools make is when they put out messaging, it's a blanket messaging. It's the same messaging to the students as it is to the parents, as it is to the mayor, as it is to local law enforcement, as it is to their vendors, as it is to people that are actually customers of the school, so maybe people who rent out space or work with the school in other ways, partners, partner organizations, religious affiliations and organizations. I got to tell you folks, all of these people have different interests. They have different concerns. So we really need to think through our stakeholder groups, group-like groups together, but make sure that we're creating messages that speak directly to what those people's concerns are. And we want to make sure that we're focusing on why are we communicating. Are we communicating just to communicate? How many times have we seen someone rush to communicate in front of a camera who says the exact wrong thing. We see it all the time. Just because you're the senior leader of a major school or organization doesn't mean you're the right person to stand in front of the camera. You might feel really comfortable standing there answering the question of what happened. Well, there was a recall on a specific type of food from our cafeterias, and it has been removed. But are you prepared for the second question? When they put the microphone in your face and say, why did you allow the children in our community to be poisoned? What are you going to say? Are you prepared for that? I dare say anyone on this call is not. So you must predict the risk, plan for it through training, mapping, scenario outlining, and then test in order to perform more effectively. Predict, plan, perform. So when we prepare our messages, prepare a list of those stakeholders we discussed and their concerns. And remember, a stakeholder community is going to vary with the type of event. So let's say there is a food recall or an issue with food. Let's say there's a communicable illness outbreak where 70% of your school population is not attending. Those are very different messages, right? You have one that they both affect health, but they're different. Can my kids take classes at your school remotely? I don't want them coming to school right now and getting sick. What do we do for other people in our family to keep them safe? They're different kinds of issues, so you need to have a different communications. And again, ask yourself as often as possible, why this specific communication at this time? Keep your communications short and concise. It will also help when you map out where you're going to communicate, because if you're going to share the message on social media, it is so much easier on you if you pre-prepare it at 110 characters with a hashtag. It is easier to edit than create. So have 20 messages ready so that you can grab them and then copy and paste and modify as appropriate for the issue that's occurring. Make sure you've identified what the risk perception and fear factors are for the different groups. Some folks may say, oh, that's not a big deal. It's not a problem. It happened to us when I was a kid all the time. Another group of people might say, oh my God, that's horrible. That's frightening. We've learned such new news about whatever this threat is. So you have different people who have really different perceptions of what may be going on. So your clear and concise messages are going to be key toward making sure you can manage the crisis effectively. Whenever we've seen a crisis occur as well, what do? You jump in your car and you rush toward the school. If your children are somewhere that's in a crisis, whether it's a fire in a lab or something else, some other type of threat, if you're able to, you jump in your car and you rush towards your children. So we need to make sure that we train people. The first thing you do is go here, look at this message, because this is where we're going to be giving you clear and concise instructions about exactly what you need to do, because we know how concerned you are about your child right now. Those targeted messages are going to really help you control a situation. Message maps are simple, and they're actually fun. This is something you can do around a conference table or take your team out for pizza and sit around and talk about, okay, what could happen? You know, the reason FEMA did the whole scenario with the zombie apocalypse is not because FEMA believes that we're all going to become zombies one day. It's because it was fun. It was a good way to create an interesting scenario that actually had concrete survival exercises within it. It included messaging, where to go for help, preventive techniques, an interesting exercise, and you would do well to do the same thing with your team on this first step of managing crisis, which is message mapping and communications. Answer questions and concerns. Think about the impact. What is the impact of not only the statement, but the situation or concern that has arisen? Who is the stakeholder? And then map out your messages and how they will be delivered. Are these social media messages? Are these messages in text messages to parents? Are these notifications through our notification system? And then when you look at message maps, you can think of a variety of scenarios right now that you might use them for. Look at 2016 or 2015, gather all the times you had a crisis together, and use those as templates. Did you ever have to close the school unannounced in an unexpected manner? Was there ever an incident of injury or violence in your organization? We had a school system recently that had a parent dropping off a student, and the parent suffered a heart attack while they were dropping off their child. Well, people sprang into action in an exemplary manner. They had one person who was in charge of making sure the child was safe, but not seeing something that would disturb them in a traumatic manner. They had someone else who was in charge of getting medical personnel there on the spot. The medical personnel that was on site had a defibrillator and were trained in how to use it. I mean, they were a well-oiled machine when this happened. And the communication that went out to that school's parents and students was crafted ahead of time, so they were able to say there wasn't an situation. They did not comment on the status of the person who suffered the incident, but they made it clear it was not an external incident with a weapon or something like that. But they had to be very careful, again, because we have someone's medical information is involved in this. But they thought that through. They thought through, how can we message about something like this and be in compliance? What if there's a shelter in place in the school? The worst thing for a parent, and you know this, is when their child texts and says, Mom, we're in a lockdown. Mom, we're in a lockout. Dad, we're sheltering in place. What if there is an evacuation? Why? Will it be reopened? You know, I don't know if you recall, but there was a situation where there was the threat of a type of virus in a school, and without checking appropriate guidelines, the coach decided he was going to wash down everything in the facility, including student equipment, I think it was for the football team, with really caustic chemicals, which created this huge secondary crisis. When the students put their equipment on, they got burns. So there is messaging that has to be made available and planned out in ahead for when you make a mistake. Think about that as well. Now, we don't want you to spend all your time just messaging. What we really want you to do is have these conversations and create messages for your stakeholders that approaches their questions or concerns, at least on the high level on the key issues. And when you create these key messaging, make sure you have supporting information, again, for those aha questions, like why did you allow our students to be burned? When we have you do these exercises, they allow you, again, to go to that time ATM and buy yourself time. We want you to be able to deliver clear and timely messages in a crisis to help let your team know you're a leader and you're in charge. We want you to deliver messages to maintain high visibility in a way that's positive for your school and your brand. And that may be in news conferences, through social media, press releases. But we really want you to be able to correct any misconception or errors in media reporting if they're critical to the point. So again, the tree falling at 1 or the tree falling at 5 is not the biggest story. The big point is we want your kids to be safe. And we want you to be able to deliver that targeted message in a positive, articulate, and concise manner. This is the Firestorm Crisis Management Performance Maturity Rating Model. It's one of my favorite things. I work with this with my own team. We want to strive to go from a stage 1 liability organization where everything is a surprise and we're unprepared to a stage 4 strategic opportunity, a strategic culture of preparedness where we have a clear playbook for crisis and we know exactly the decisions we will make. We set out our calendar for webinars a year and a half in advance. Why? Because something might happen. And we want to be prepared because we value your participation too much to allow you to show up one day and have us not be on the call. We have clearly defined and established roles. We understand how we're going to communicate and what we are going to communicate. We have backups to our backups. We're efficient and timely in our decision making. And we have a proven messaging process with predefined messages. We'd like you to take away from this today, A, that we value you, and we want you to have the opportunity to update your risk and threat assessment. So please, if you'd like to schedule that, give us a call. We'll be happy to do that for you. Again, we'll waive the $2,500 fee. We then want you to align your crisis communication plan with best practices and develop a strategy for all types of media outlets. Finalize your crisis communication plan then with these message maps. Let that be your goal over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And then contact Firestorm for support and also analysis of your current insurance to make sure in 2017 going forward you're covered appropriately. And last, stress test your plan. Join us April 6th from 2 to 4 as we stress test our virtual stress test exercise, and this will be on cyber breach. This paper will be available, a brief of this session, probably in about 24 hours on our website at firestorm.com/briefs, but a copy of the recording should be uploaded to our YouTube channel under the Tennessee Association of Independent Schools playlist within the next couple of hours. I've really appreciated you taking the time from your spring break today to listen to me ramble on, and I look forward to talking to you next month as we talk about predictive intelligence, monitoring, and how to aggregate information to identify behaviors of concern. If you'd like a private webinar for your organization, please contact us at webinars@firestorm.com. I'll give you back your day. Thank you so much for your participation, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, and goodbye.